It's good to see you. Today we are working from the Flavor, Forks, and Knives cookbook. We are making one I may have made with you before. This is Diane's Super Vegetable Korma. You can see there's this beautiful picture there of a really nice tomato sauce with a lot of veggies over rice. So that's what we're shooting for. And I've done a little bit of prep work to get us started. So instead of sauteing, we're once again using water in the pots. So those are ready to go. Those are warm. You can see it even steaming. And once again, anytime you start with something like this that you see in a pot, it's probably going to start with an onion garlic base. So once again, we are there chopping up our onion. I cut it in half to give myself a flat base. I cut it the long way. I do a quarter turn, and I get the short way, which gives you an automatic dice. And the recipe itself calls for a half of an onion. I tend not to play that game. I just don't like storing my onion. So usually I go ahead and add a full onion or buy onions roughly the right size. Occasionally you will see me store an onion for a later time, but I sometimes forget then because I don't do it normally, and they kind of dry out after you've cut them, even with the specialized little holders that they have at the store, which I can actually show you. Right, so you can buy one for your onion and your tomato and your avocado, but I don't find that they're just so amazing. So I like to just use an onion that I would feel comfortable using. And I'm again making a triple batch, one for a friend and then a double batch for my family, because at the end of the day, these get packed up and become lunches for the next day, which is really great. We're not thinking really hard in the morning, and everybody's getting a varied lunch. So once again, we have a lot of garlic at play. So to prep these, right, I pulled them out clove by clove, pressed down to get the peel, ripped off the peels, and now we're ready for mincing. So it is 6 cloves per batch, which, is that right? I did 12 cloves, 12 divided by 3, 4 cloves per batch. So it's a lot again, and I can show you here. So I'm using this small little mincer because I like the texture that it brings the garlic to inevitably, to keep turning these down once they're nice and warm. And as I always tell you, if you don't have time, use garlic powder or chop it the day before or something like that. There are ways to get around having to spend the time mincing your garlic here. But it is what it is. And you can kind of see there is some extra work involved with making a triple batch, right? There's more garlic to peel, more onions to cut, and this kind of thing. But if you're already in the kitchen and you're cooking, it can be nice to get a bunch done all at one time. And this kind of a meal you could freeze or something to that effect. A lot of people don't like to eat the same food over and over again, which is why if you're like a single person cooking, people tend to say, oh, this homemade cooking's not for me. I wouldn't want to eat the same thing for 7 meals. Totally understandable. You could also consider having a batch, going the other way with it. And imagine how fast your cooking would be. Over here, I've already got potatoes that are pre-steamed. So I'm just rinsing my garlic press for the moment and then coming back over. So I don't like how garlic makes your hands all sticky, which is why I always have to do that. So when you're sauteing with water, you just want to make sure that nothing is sticking to the bottom of the pan. These are a 1/4 cup of water per batch, so there's a 1/2 cup of water per batch, or for the double batch. And I'm just making a quick turn in the pan. The notion with this kind of thing of starting here is to make sure that the onion gets translucent. And so I've done my onion and my garlic. As I recall, the next part is the peppers. Yes. Let me just make sure I've got everything. Onion, garlic, and bell peppers. So I did a little bit of prep work on my peppers. The recipe calls for red peppers. I have a mixture of red, yellow, and green. And I've just cut them out of their kind of stem with their seeds. So when I do that, you'll see I have these biases. I just go right down avoiding the white and then throw away the stem. Other people do it different ways. Honestly, it does not matter. But each recipe is meant to get one onion one pepper. And for me, I just had bought a bag of tricolored peppers. So anything in the red, orange, yellow family is fine. Red is a beautiful color, but the red, yellow, and orange are all nice and sweet. And so if you go with a green, you'll have a slightly more bitter flavor. That will make a difference in your flavor profile, but not horribly. So if you're like, I can't afford the colorful peppers, go with the green peppers. It'll have a different look to it. Or, save it for a week when they've got the peppers on sale. Or skip all of this, buy frozen, tricolored, pre-diced peppers, and throw them in a pot with the sauce. Like, get yourself to that moment. You could buy diced hash browns. You could buy the diced peppers here. You see I have carrots ready to go. You can buy those pre-cut. So if you are just too busy, but you want to eat a vegetable-filled, flavorful meal where you don't have to count your calories and worry about how much you ate and if it matches your diet. I mean, check out the Weight Watchers stuff. I have a friend, hadn't seen her all summer, saw her again. Holy cow, did she look like a different person. I said, oh, is that sugar thing? Because I knew she'd been cutting back on her sugar when last we talked. No, she said, Weight Watchers. Holy cow. So Weight Watchers has changed their point system and allowed people to eat a lot of stuff so long as they're eating it in a good way. So vegetables tend to be one of those things that you can eat quite a few of, and there is no consequence. So I'm roughly dividing my 3 peppers so that one batch gets roughly 2 peppers and one batch gets roughly 1 pepper. They go in. It's going to add some beautiful color. It's going to add flavor. Yum, yum, yum. I just love it. Come over here. And then while this is all going, I'll go ahead and add my carrot too. So I'm just going to keep being mindful of those, but they seem to be doing just fine. So the recipe itself calls for 2 large carrots. This one's a little extra large, so I'm going to put my hand on top in order to cut down and make it more of a half moon look. The rest of them are probably fine. But this requires nothing more than a rocking motion on your carrot. And you don't want them too big because they'll cook too slowly. You could also take them through a mandolin if that's your thing. I have tried running them through a food processor and like that slicer function, but they're really thin then, which I have not found to be an enjoyable texture when I'm making some sort of a hearty, stew-esque, chili-esque meal. So you kind of got to do what you think is going to work for your family, obviously. But I think the only type of vegetable I wouldn't recommend getting that's pre-prepped would be canned carrots, right? Because they're going to be so mushy, they'll just fall apart on you, which would not be fun even a little bit. But you can make fast work. If you want the fresh carrot but you don't have time to peel it, they do cut them into carrot sticks. They charge you for it, but it is possible to get them even pre-peeled if that's the barrier. The other thing that I tend to hear people say a lot is like, but look at all those ingredients. And people often think that the ingredients mean extra steps. But a lot of times the ingredients are just spices. And so you're looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, the steps, when really you're going to throw all those spices in one step. That's not a big deal. So you do kind of want to keep that in mind. If you see 10 steps and it's working with crusts, yes, that is going to take you a bear of a time, and I would definitely reconsider how much time you have. But this kind of a thing, put on some music in the background, or put on a TV show or a podcast, or have a friend, or if you've got kids, like, I've already done the peeling here, but my kids love going back and forth, helping me with the trash. The older ones are learning the peeling aspect of it. So you can make a family affair of it. I mean, eating is a family affair, right? You're not the only one putting the food into your mouth. But, like I said, This recipe would be super easy to have if you're a single person. 1 carrot instead of 2, and you've got dinner tonight and lunch tomorrow, and then it's over. You're on to the next thing. Okay. Let me go ahead and, you know me, if you've been watching these videos, I tend to add extra veggies to things because I have kids that will eat the cooked carrots. I love that, and so I just throw in a few extra wherever I can to keep people eating their veggies, to bulk up the meal, because I am cooking for big groups, and so I have to keep that in mind. But carrots make your meal kind of sweet. They're a sweet vegetable, and that's kind of a fun thing for the littles who are just getting started on trying to eat in this world. Okay, let's take a look. So we have our onion, our pepper, our garlic, our water, and that's cooking till the onion is tender. It's looking tender. We are good to go. It's become a little translucent. Our potatoes have been cooked, so that too is done. Our carrots are in here. Oh, they should have gone with the potatoes. It is what it is. So our next job then is to put our potatoes together with the stuff that we've got going here. Add our tomato sauce, our chickpeas, our curry, and our cinnamon. And another 1/2 cup of water. Okay, great. So exciting. So, the recipe calls for 1 pound of baby red potatoes. I had bought a huge, probably 15-pound bag of Yukon Gold potatoes last week. I want to make sure to use up what I didn't use last week. So, these are Yukon Golds. She says 1 pound, otherwise known as about 6 cups. So, I'm going to grab a 1 cup measuring spoon here, and then you're going to watch me get super non-specific again, because that's how I roll. Whenever it talks about measurement, heaping is just fine in my book. Potatoes are going to add for you a really nice starch. They're really filling, which is great. They're soft, so it's very Thanksgiving-y. That's the thing about Indian food for Americans, I think, is it almost cooks up like chili. Different flavor profile, but so tasty that way. I totally lost track. I have no idea where I'm at. So, let me do this one. 1, 2. So I just want to make sure that my friends don't get a whole pot of potatoes. 3, 4. I'm so messy. And it really fills up the pot. I'll show you when I'm done here. 6. And then, as I often do, a little extra for everybody. This one needed extra anyhow. I don't know how much. But I'm going to show you. Get some of the starch off my hands. I didn't peel these. You could if you're feeling like that would be good for you. Put my towel back. So that starts to create the bulk of your meal in there. We're also going to have rice, of course, so that's another starch. And you can use as little or as much rice as you want. But let me incorporate this a bit. When you add tomato sauce, as we're going to, things tend to cook slower in tomato sauce. So that's something you're going to want to be aware of. This calls for a 1/2 cup of water to go in addition. So let me go ahead and add those, because now that I've added a starch, it could easily stick to the bottom. These are not non-stick. They're the opposite of non-stick. So a can per batch means that one of these is going to get a full can and one's going to get a not full can. I've already got a spatula, so I can pour in some tomato sauce and then scrape the sides just so that we get all the tomato sauce that we can. It's nice to, I have really kind of wrecked my spatulas, I've put them in food processors when you're not supposed to and stuff like that. So I have I could do pretty much anything with mine because they mean nothing to me. I've already wrecked them. One way that sometimes people like to get rid of stuff like that is to put a little water in and rinse it around. But I'm already going to be adding a plant-based milk later, so I'm going to do it this way instead. But when I rinsed my chickpeas, I just opened the top and let the water out. With all the different liquids going, I didn't feel the need to create a colander situation. My colander was already being used by the potatoes anyways. so these are going to get a little stir. I have to add in my spices anyways, so really the only reason to stir right now is just to keep incorporating and moving things around so it doesn't stick to the bottom. But this needs about 10 minutes, so it's totally worth it to have that ready and moving. And you see these are like, this one is a slightly smaller pot, but it's going to be nice and full. And I could be cooking my rice right now. I'm not, because I'm going to be offering these meals up in several hours from now, so I don't need to cook my rice up right now. But you could have started your whole prep. And if you're making one batch, you could have been boiling your potatoes while you were doing your onions and garlic. It's just that I was making so many potatoes. Okay, so curry. This is more of a yellow curry. I've had ones that tend towards red. But it's 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to be like maybe 1.5 tablespoons on that one. Because you never know with littles if that's going to feel like a lot to them or not. We don't want to stress out our kid palates. We want them to keep coming back to dinner. Then the cinnamon is just a touch. It's just there to change that flavor a bit. I think it's an 1/8. Yes. This is really a tiny amount of cinnamon. For one thing, cinnamon is powerful. But it's just there to give a hint of extra sweetness. And it really works. This is a beautiful, wonderful meal. Oh, you know what else I'm going to add in right away is the salt. So in whole plant cooking, there is a move towards using not a ton of salt. But in our family, what we have discovered, we need to make sure that people feel like their food is well seasoned. So I'm going to do what I need to do there just to keep everybody eating again. But once you've got those spices, you're going to move them around so that they start to incorporate into the flavors. And you are so close at this point. Like, once you get to this point, you're talking about still just needing to add some plant-based milk and some spinach, which is going to wilt and steam. And because I cook ahead of time, my spinach isn't going to stay that really beautiful bright green. But if you were cooking just in time to eat, you would cook until it gets just wilted and bright green like that, and then you would eat. In our case, it'll look more like a soup. So in a soup, it gets that darker green flavor. And, you know, I think in a different season of life, hopefully I'll go back to that reality. But right now, we've got kids to pick up, we've got homework to do, we've got extracurriculars to be at, I've got a husband to pick up. So I am not here waiting for everyone to get home. I am out and about with everyone. And when I get home to serve, I need to be able to put it on the table right now. So if I didn't work from home, I would make this meal the night before. And I would always be cooking a day ahead is how that would end up working. Because I have definitely tried. We once worked in a place where I could cook there. There was a stove. But, you know, you're in somebody else's kitchen. You have limited supplies. I ended up making, like, quesadillas. I occasionally made a soup or something like that. But nothing like I would cook at home. Another way you can do it, make up a bunch of meals on one day, right? Like, give yourself 4 hours. Make your meals for the week. And then go for it from there. All right, so we've transferred, and those are coming together. And the idea is for that sauce to thicken. It is thick, so I can move right on to the next step, which is to add the milk and the spinach and let that come up to a boil as well. So let me just show you. Plant-based milk, you could put regular milk in here, you could put coconut milk in here. Coconut milk would change the flavor a little bit. I'm using an almond milk, which I am making from 1 tablespoon of almond butter to 1 cup of water. And so that came from the How Not to Die cookbook. It's the easiest plant-based milk recipe. Others you like soak almonds and then you squeeze them out in a cheesecloth, or maybe you soak something else and then you put it in a blender, and it's like a lot of steps. This is one step. You do have to get something dirty, but it's not bad. So I've got 4 cups or so in here. I'm just going to give it a quick turn because the almond butter tends to fly to the bottom. So I just want to reincorporate that. And the recipe calls for 1.5 cups per batch. So what I often find is I've over I've over given to a recipe. So I'd be a little careful at this point when I'm adding in, just to make sure I don't over add. This one will get 3 cups. Even now I'm being a bit messy about it. And before I add my spinach, oops, sorry. I just want to take this around a bit, and this will thicken up as well. But this is what's going to make your sauce so creamy. If it was purely tomato sauce, it would not be this creamy. But this gives it a really beautiful, light, mild texture. And once you're going, and it's cold right now, so once you put, it's just like this melty, amazing flavor in your mouth. I just love it. I'm going to turn this down again. With these cressettes or Dutch oven pots, they're heavy duty, so once they heat up, they retain their heat really well. So I'm always keeping an eye to make sure that they're not overheating and then overcooking or sticking to the bottom or anything like that. This one I gave a little bit more sauce to, because again, you're going to put it with rice. You don't want it to be completely dry or thick. Once you put in that spinach too, it's going to wilt up, and that's going to additionally add a little water. Same idea if you were adding mushrooms, they add a little water, or zucchini, which is a really great flavor. All right, so spinach amount, I almost read the rice amount, 1.5 cups it says. So I'm not into measuring. I would say that's roughly 2 cups of spinach. But for me, I have no other plans for the spinach this week, so I'm going to be super generous with how much of the spinach that I use. And then I'll probably use the rest of this for a smoothie. Why not? Because I don't want to overpower my dish with too much spinach. But spinach cooks down, so there's no need for me to be too concerned about that. Also, spinach is a super light green, so it's not going to be tough like kale. I don't have to worry about chopping it into smaller bits. In a lot of those recipes that call for kale, occasionally, and especially when we were just getting started, I would sub out spinach because we would try kale, and I would find like, oh, that's just a lot to ask of the littles to enjoy that kale. But spinach does take a minute to wilt, right? It has to get warm. So all I'm really trying to do is get it into the wetness right now. Another way you could do it is just cover it and let it steam a little bit, and then turn it around in the pan, especially if you've got a lot, because you could take, you know, a pot like this, fill it almost to the top with collard greens, and it would come down to almost nothing in the pan. So you want to keep that in mind with the leafy greens. It looks like a lot, it's not. And, you know, they're so good for you. The greener, the more vitamins you get. It's like a whole nother way to get some of the vitamins that we traditionally would get from fruit even. So from this point, I'll certainly want to make sure my carrots are soft before I turn the heat off or kind of walk away from this dish. But once this spinach is wilted, I'm adding lemon juice to brighten the flavor, and that is it, with the exception of, get off, with the exception of the rice. So not that bad, right? And again, if you were having, or if you didn't want to deal with fresh spinach because maybe you're concerned that it's going to go bad in your fridge, you could buy pre-chopped cut spinach, right? So with all of these things, you can keep that in mind. You don't have to mix up your almond milk. You can buy almond milk or regular milk or coconut milk or soy milk or rice milk. You could, any of it. Just, it needs to get wet. It needs something creamy. That's kind of the deal. Ironically, almond butter and water doesn't kind of strike me as being super creamy. But if you're concerned about fat content, obviously using almond butter is not the same as when they soak almonds and then squeeze out the pulp, and you're left with this like 15 calorie or 35 calorie per half cup. This is going to be more calories because it's almond butter. But we sauteed without any oil. We don't have any fatty beef or pork or anything like that. So I feel comfortable with having my fat come from that nut butter and having that protein come in that way as well. That's kind of the beauty of I also don't have any cheese going in here, right? So additionally, there's no fat coming from a dairy product as it is. Coconut, by the way, does have extra fat content. Some people worry about that. So if you're looking to keep track of those things, again, you could use the almond milk from the store that is unsweetened, and you'd have a very low calorie addition to your meal. It'll taste different a little bit, not a lot. That's getting really close though. You can see how that spinach is starting to fall into the pot and how it almost doesn't matter anymore. This one could use a little more heat all of a sudden just to allow that. And I still have a little extra juice here, so I don't mind having a little extra sauce. Add that in. Anyways, what was I going to do with that little bit of extra? But see how a recipe too, it doesn't have to be so exact. Like, oh, I've got to level it off. I don't know. I'm kind of dumping in other areas. I added extra carrot and I wasn't very specific with my potato. So it's okay to be like, is that the right amount? And second guess it and make a different choice for yourself. Similarly, if you like your food hot, red pepper flakes could have gone in here as well. I don't add that. I'm cooking for a family with 4 kids and another family with 4 kids, but 2 are babies, so they're not going to eat this. So, you know, we're not going to add the red pepper flakes at this time. Or if we are, we're going to add it to our own meal once it's in our bowl. That's okay too. Sometimes it's nice to make what you need to make for the larger group and then adjust for your own tastes. So we're really close. Because this is going to sit and cook for a while, I don't have to worry about that spinach even. And then in terms of like, how do I know about these carrots that I referenced earlier? You can really just grab one with a fork and you need to be able to push through it. So these are getting close, but they're not fully ready to be eaten. You wouldn't want it to be as hard as it is now. So what I'm going to do is put lids on these, and at the very end, they'll get that dousing of lemon juice, and then I'll make my rice later. So I'll show you my lids. They're not exciting, but I'll show them to you anyway. So big, heavy-duty lids. This will keep everything kind of in that steaming so it doesn't lose a lot of the liquid while it's cooking as well. I'll probably give it 10 minutes. I'll check it and make sure that that is a fork tender. If it still doesn't seem fork tender, I'll make sure it has the right amount of liquid before I close it up again and give it another 5-10 minutes. And at the very end, lemon juice. So that is the korma. It's really a beautiful dish. I mean, just so gorgeous. Then you add that rice and it's additionally hearty, and you can play around it. You could use a white rice, a brown rice, a black rice, a red rice. We are going to use white rice today, but I really love black rice. I often buy it in bulk online now. So that is the korma. Thank you so much for being with me, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.